We're good?
No, it's on.
All right, Tiski, we're ready when you are.
Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to start tonight with the Activities Committee. There's no public comment. No one signed up for public comment, so we will start with the international trip proposal for the Gems of Portugal and Spain in 2024 with Mrs. Marchese.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm used to it.
Nikki, it's okay to sit at the table.
I was gonna say,
Oh,
sit down.
Yeah.
Great,
Yep,
thank you.
yep.
I feel so far away.
Right, please.
Well, thank you for having me. I know everyone's so busy, so I don't want to take up too much time. But this past summer, we got back out on the road. So I don't know if you know, but we were able to go to the Alps, to the Mediterranean. So I took 60 fellow Penridge students and chaperones to Switzerland, Italy, France, and Spain. It was wonderful to be back out again. COVID derailed us for a couple of years. So for some background, so everyone knows, back in 2016, I started doing some international trips with Penridge. I've taken Penridge students to England, Ireland, and Wales. In 2017, I took students to Australia. 2018, we went to Peru. And 2019, we did Italy and Greece. And then we had a 2-year hiatus. And this past year, like I said, we went to the Alps Mediterranean. This coming summer, we are heading back down under to Australia and New Zealand. So I'm very excited. It's my special place in the world. And then for 2024, I'm proposing the Gems of Portugal and Spain, which is a 13-day trip. Also, a little background, with EF, we can do customized tours, and so I customized this tour. I took some pieces from other tours that EF had and created my own. EF loved it so much, and they made it a brochure tour. So, I'm very proud of that. So just to go through the request form, the trip is 13 days. It'll go out to students who are current 7th through 10th grade. So when they actually can go on the trip, because I plan so far out for payment reasons and such, they will be rising freshmen through juniors. So we can take about 45 travelers, and that would give us a 6-to-1 ratio, so 7 chaperones. We would not be missing any school days. We do it during the summer. So our estimated time for departure is June 20th, 2024, and return is around July 2nd. Those won't be solidified until about 4 to 5 months beforehand, due to the fact that we try to, EF does as much like for pricing and such like that. So the families all know that when they enroll. So the rationale for the trip. So I forgot to mention, I'm a school counselor at North Middle School. So, I love that we can bring what the kids learn in the books to real life. But my passion is for, the growth and everything. So I always say to parents, when you drop off your student on June 20th to me, to go to the airport, and when you come back on July 2nd to pick them up, they'll be a different student because of the growth that they have had in those 13 days. It's amazing to see the smiles, the emails I get back from the families, and everything. And, I have so many repeat travelers. If travelers haven't repeated, then their sibling comes and stuff like that. So it's a great experience for all. So it's a big world out there, and so we get to explore different things that they've learned in their books, but most importantly, we adopted Habits of the Mind a few years ago, and it probably hits a majority of them, but some key ones that I picked out was remaining open to continuous learning, responding with wonderment and awe, and this one is key, like just seeing like the faces and their experiences, the little things that you think like, wow, I didn't think they would love that. Like this past trip, there was a bowling alley across the street when we were in Provence, France, and they were like, Marchese, can we go bowling? I was like, sure. So we went bowling one night, and you would think it was the best thing in the world. So it's just awesome to see, even like, the chaperones that go with me, just getting that experience also and having that relationship with kids in a different way. So the precedent is that we've had previous trips by the board have been granted. The costs, the question that everyone always has. So it's about $4,500 for a student to attend. They have about 19 months to pay, so they can do that in installments. EF also allows donations to be given, so they can put out a page for donations to family and friends. So those holidays, those birthdays that come up, instead of getting another sweater for Christmas from grandma, they can get, some money towards a fabulous experience. $165 of that for $4,500 is the trip insurance, because I make sure every student has trip insurance that covers accident, loss of luggage, like just that general travel protection area. Chaperones, like I mentioned, is 6-to-1. So for every 6 paying travelers, we get a chaperone. So hotels are located outside the city center, and that's done, for security reasons. They're in locations that wouldn't be, bustling with different things. Plus, all the students understand that if there's anything that, if they leave the hotel, it's a one-way ticket home, and that the parents are made aware of that from the get-go in my meetings, that there's no questions asked, that safety reasons that has to happen. The countries I'm proposing to go to are Level 1, U.S. Department, and then EF has comprehensive safety plans. They've been a company for over 55 years. They're the largest educational travel company in the world. Their reach is extensive. So every country that they travel, they have offices in, so they can be the first to respond if there's an emergency or anything. If anything happens before the trip, God forbid, if something was going on in those countries, we could reroute our trip to different locations. Because of EF's reach being so large, they have the capability of doing that. And then hopefully you have the itinerary. I don't want to bore you going through this like line by line, but a couple of the highlights I had was that we're going to Portugal and Spain. So Portugal, for a lot of our kids, is probably like, oh, I've heard of it. Probably those explorers that I heard about that discovered, so much part of the world and everything. So they really, in Portugal, that's a huge highlight to them, is their history of that. We would explore Lisbon, Sintra, and the Algarve region. I have had the pleasure to go to Portugal a few years ago, and it was a magnificent spot, and I'm so excited to go back and take students. And then we spent a huge amount of our time in Spain. This part of Spain I have not been to. The southern part is really where we're concentrating. So I'm very excited to get to experience this. But so many of our students, even if you go back to our middle school, they do Spanish classes in 7th grade and 8th grade and such. So they have that cultural significance of it. Something I think is really cool on this tour, we would do a tapas tour, so they get to try, tapas, something that maybe they've never even heard of, and get to try it at a couple different locations. In Granada, there's a scavenger hunt that we get to see the different parts of the city. And then there's a flamenco evening in a cave that's supposed to be wonderful, so I'm so excited to experience that. And then the best part of the trip from my point of view is Barcelona, which is one of my favorite locations in the world. Seeing Gaudi's architecture and different sites in Barcelona, which is a magical city in my perspective. So I just rushed through all that. Is there any questions?
I see that this looks new to me, the earning credits.
Oh, we don't do that.
Oh, we're not doing, okay.
No, I mean, it's not something I've ever put through. So, no, they don't earn high school credits.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Unless that's something you want to do in the future.
Well, I noticed for the high school, it says that the tuition is free, they just have to complete the final project. But-
Yeah, so that would be something that we would have to, of course, put through the board and everything.
Yeah. And then are you aware of what the restrictions are? That you would tell the families, right, for COVID
Yes.
vaccination and all that sort
Yeah,
of thing?
so that's changing daily. So right before we left, we actually had the best news that I could have had, was we didn't have to test to come back into the United States. So there was really no COVID restrictions this past summer for us going to Europe. Things are loosening up as they happen. Right now, we're not sure this summer if there will be COVID vaccinations are needed, but yes, if we need vaccinations, yes, that would be discussed.
And then, Mr. Cormack had said he can't be here tonight, but he said that he would be supportive of the trip, but he wanted me to make sure that all of the normal, we've talked about it many times with these trips, the insurance and all of that's in place, and I was sure it was, but I wanted to say it out loud to make sure that he was asking about that.
Yep. Every student must do the $165 international trip insurance.
Well, can I clarify, that's part of the 45 thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And there's the background checks I noticed for
Yep.
all of this.
Yep. So EF does their own background checks, but then the chaperones are Penridge employees, so they have their background checks too.
Good. Any other questions?
I always ask if I can go.
Yeah.
We had talked before, but and maybe, and I feel like I don't wanna keep repeating it, but what, with regard to people that can't afford it, what are we doing? I know that there was some things mentioned here from the organizational standpoint, but what do we do on the board level, not a board, but a district level, to try to subsidize it in any way? I know they may have fundraisers and things like that, but there's still gonna be a gap between those that have and those that don't. And we talked about before, and I just wanna kind of spur that on, where and I forget the name of it,
The community.
the
Oh,
association.
the education fund.
Yeah.
Right,
Organization,
so
yeah.
is there a way to partner with them at all, and has anybody looked into that? And I'm not gonna fault you for not doing it, but I'd like somebody maybe to look into that with the foundation, say, cause one of the desires is to have everybody that goes through Penridge to have the same opportunity. And the fact that you may be in a family that can't afford this, and we talked about before, if we have a large number of families that can't afford lunch, you're not gonna have families that have $4,500 to send somebody away for a summer trip that might be really educationally exciting for them. So how do we level that such that, there's a parity of sorts for people that have the resources and those that don't, so that the children of those families are able to experience the same opportunity. So anyway, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'd like somebody to look into it maybe as to see how that could be
And I
assisted
can
in some way.
talk with you guys about looking into that more and such, because I know I'm not the only one who runs these, so it probably has to be on a bigger scale that it should, all of us are part of that.
Absolutely. Nikki, is anyone, I'm just looking at the Global Citizen Scholarship Fund through EF, has anyone ever
Apply,
Not, people apply,
Okay.
but no one from my trips that I am aware of have received that. I know a bunch of people did apply this past years for it, because it's 6 months out that they apply for it.
Right.
But unfortunately, no one got it from my trips. I'm not a part of that process, that's through EF directly.
Right, that's what I figured, it was
Yeah.
separate.
Yeah, so the one I don't have an answer, like you said, but the one thing I do say to families when they are asking about the costs and such, the reason I plan so far out is that they can start looking and being like, okay, like, I have a child in 2 years that might wanna be able to go, like, if I could put $50 a month away and do that to grow that, they have the donation page which they can spread out to family and friends directly, and that is not a GoFundMe kind of situation where percentage gets taken off. That is directly 100% that goes to that student towards that balance. So there are ways to achieve it. You do have to plan earlier. So I try to do as much as I can in planning earlier. It's hard to plan even sooner, like having 6th grade families looking ahead to 9th grade, So I feel like I'm at my edge right there with the 7th grade families, because even some of them are like, I don't know if my 7th grader will be ready to go in 2 years. But I say, well, these exist, so come 10th or 11th grade, you still have that opportunity.
Sure.
So that's the short answer for right now. The longer answer,
And this is probably beyond somebody's ability to answer to it, unless if we have the from the math and business side. But if the parents have a 529 plan, they could probably use the funds from that to put into that. So that's something to look into too, because it's an educational expense. So if the parents are funding a 529, they might be able to direct it to be used for something like this. just another thought, opportunity.
That's awesome. I would never have thought of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Yep.
Good,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Okay, now other public comment. So that's it for the activities committee agenda.
We'll go right into curriculum then. So, guess there wasn't anybody signed up for curriculum either for public
There's no
comment?
one.
Okay. Alright, so our first item is a course proposal for housing and interior design two.
Just wants to sit up here.
Thanks for doing back to school night
Yes.
and then
Oh,
public.
sure.
So, that's triple duty, because you taught today.
Yes.
Alright.
all good, but we're excited.
Yes, very excited. Okay, so I'm Rachel Hoffman, Karen Nace, we're from the FCS department over at the high school. And we are proposing to add a housing and interior design level 2 class to our curriculum. Just to kind of give you guys, I guess, hopefully you've seen the proposal. The biggest thing is Karen does teach the housing class, and finding that students are like, when can I take, was there another class in this? Is there something else I can do? And really, it's so hard because there's so much to cover. You just can't get it done in.
Right. You can
Housing
get
one.
through a lot of the content and the introduction and the elements and the principles, but putting it all together, there's a very short span as a half-year course to actually physically do it. So the goal is to go with the whole idea of career pathways and STEM and get them in, and actually maybe even working with the architectural classes or a model home, and they actually physically start designing each and every room within the house, and they're hands-on. I would love to take them out and see samples or bring samples in, take them to home shows, anything of that sort. I mean, it's a life skill, everybody's gonna use it. And they do, that's what they love. When they get into it, you really see them go to town. So I'm excited. I mean, we did a little dollhouse last year, someone donated, and they had so much fun designing one room and making little miniature furniture out of popsicle sticks and fabric. But they definitely love. And I have a lot of kids that are interested. They keep saying, Mrs. Nace, is there another course? Why don't we have another course? So that's why we started
And to your credit, you've been talking about it for the last
Yeah, we
couple
have
of
for a
years.
couple of years.
COVID kind of put things on
With
the back
COVID,
burner.
yeah, and stuff like that.
It is definitely driven by student interest, so I
Yes.
really appreciate you working on this.
And we're trying to do it in a cost-effective way. We're gonna use the same textbook. And currently, we're looking at software, 5D Planner. They're willing to let us use it and sample it. If for some, right, we're working with Chris Brockman, and we'll be meeting with him tomorrow just to check it out, so that I can try to pilot it in my course this year a little bit, cause they gave us some freebie licenses for on the laptops. If it seems like the app would be better, that's where the cost might come in for using it as an app versus on the website. So, otherwise, I think the licenses on the web are ours.
Yeah, we
Because
have
of education.
We have 100 free ones right now, but like we said, we want to see how that works to make sure that it would work. Because the other thing is having a semester class, we need to kind of put it on their computers and then be able to take it off at the end of the semester and then
So
put it
that's
on.
why we might need the
Yeah.
app versus the website.
So we'll be working on that.
From the career pathway standpoint, is that interior design, is it both a 2-year program and a 4-year program that you would, move on from, say, if you're trying to get interest in that at the high school level, or they do, when they go to beyond, like from the
As far as like colleges,
post-secondary, yeah.
I mean, like, that's the thing. We've got amazing design schools in even going to like Montco or Bucks to be able to then go to maybe more art school or Drexel. So some of the different schools, again, we could try to maybe visit. I feel like with that level 2, you just can really, you get students that are really interested in it, and you can really take like a deeper dive into it.
And then I really love the idea of working with the CAD architecture classes from Tech Ed. So maybe they design it. This software, you can actually take the measurements. So they could be our student's client, and then they could interview them, say what do you like, and then create like a client board and kind of that again, that like doing public speaking, all those things that they're going to need to.
So you
This
have to
is-
come up with a presentation,
Does the tech school have a housing and interior design program?
not
They
that I'm
don't.
aware of.
Okay.
I would offer I'm not one of those people that do well with interior design, but I don't know, so I would offer my own house to be.
Yeah.
I
just shared
You can try it out.
So I just shared tonight with all of my parents that came in that from teaching this course, I knew a lot about it, but I felt comfortable enough that we just did our whole kitchen and I did the design, I'm super proud, my husband did all the other work, it was great. But I don't think I would have had the goal to do it prior to teaching this for how many years, so it's really cool.
And we don't need any extra staff because Karen can teach it. So.
I just had a couple of comments. I think it's an excellent addition. I think anything that students can touch and feel in today's world is an excellent opportunity for them. Something that creates beauty is also good for the soul. I think it could be a good opportunity for students to learn how to listen to a client and respond, to their requests, and are they delivering what the client is asking for, putting themselves in the client's shoes. And I also thought, so we were talking about homes, but maybe it's an opportunity to get involved in design projects throughout the district.
We have mentioned that a
Hundreds
little
of
bit too,
classrooms,
yes.
right? Even if it's
Yeah.
a section of a classroom or something like that. So I think it's a really good addition.
In one, I usually let that before the dollhouse, and even with the dollhouse, they would design a room of their choice. And it would be their decision, their liking, so I'm excited that they would have to, and I say you do have to go with what the client would like you to have.
Yeah.
Or wants, it's not what you want, it's what the client wants, and working with that. And it's kind of cool if you do even a little design, like I have so many different ideas, a design challenge where, okay, which one did they like without knowing who made them, and getting that constructive feedback, because it's good to have constructive criticism too, where I like this, but I like this here.
Right.
So, it's a good set of skills.
Now they'll be able to do, like, if, for their pathways, if that's part of it, they'll be able to do like mentorships. I'm assuming like the people, I'm sure there's people in the
That's
community
what we're
too.
hoping.
Yeah, we already talked to Chris Dyer about a builder in the community that he's got ties with. So then we were like, and then of course we were like, oh my god, we get it, and he's like, all right,
Staging, model.
yes, model home,
Yeah.
staging, everything. So we're big age.
Because it just feel like it opens the doors to have that level two where they're more experienced.
And not just housing interior design, like not just housing interior designer. There's so many other facets to it, so many other jobs that could stem from this too. So.
Any other comments? Is it convenient for entering your Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank
Yep.
you.
You go home. Good night.
I'm off, I can't see it at all.
Will this work? Is it plugged in?
Yes, that's
Okay. Is that working for where you are then? Yeah, great, perfect.
Alright, so now we have an overview of newly adopted Pennsylvania science standards with Mr. Delaney.
Good evening, everybody. Really, I wanted to bring to the board just an update on some big news that came out from Pennsylvania Department of Education, basically in the middle of the summer. So just to kind of give some of the backstory as to what's unfolded, in 2012, the National Research Council released kind of a seminal work when it comes to science education in what is called the K-12 science, or the framework for K-12 science education. It's really guided a lot of various institutions around the country in revamping what science looks like in our school systems. Okay, So then in 2013, 26 lead states, along with the National Research Council, the National Science Teachers Association, and the American Association for the Advancement of Science, kind of brought that together and produced what you will see as we continue forward as what are known as the next generation science standards. So it was really a complete overhaul of what had been in place prior to that time. In 2019, PDE, after having time allowing and watching other states around us to dig into it, was directed to begin to update our science standards here in the state of Pennsylvania. The last time prior to 2019 that they released an update was actually in the window of 2009 to 2012. So those are the last times that we got any updates to our science standards. And then just this past July, Pennsylvania finally released, kind of 3 sets of standards that you have there. Again, all integrated pieces that look at, what does science education look like here in the state of Pennsylvania. So what do we know right now? I took the time as we got these new documents to really look at how do these marry up with what has already been released as and known as the next generation science standards. And they are very closely aligned. However, Pennsylvania did add some pieces to it regarding agriculture and some very specific Pennsylvania pieces around the environment. They are designed more as performance tasks as opposed to just content and facts to know. So what you'll see, and we'll talk about it on the next slide, is what does this ask of our students that is a little bit different. PDE, and this is one of the kind of the follow-on pieces of any time we review standards, it does or it will impact what those state assessments look like. So Dr. Dina Dormer, who's one of our high school chemistry teachers, was out in Harrisburg over the summer working with the Department of Education on what does that look like, what does this rollout look like, what support are they going to be giving to schools over the coming years. And as part of that, they are looking and reviewing what's the impact going to be on those state assessments. Again, we test in 4th grade and in 8th grade in the PSSAs, and then in 9th grade in biology. And then kind of we have that end date that the state gives us where we have to have these standards fully implemented, and that's the start of the 25-26 school year. So if you were to come up to the office that Ms. Vitale and I share, you will see right on my board, it says July 31st, 2025 is the final date. The old standards are in place. That is the sunset date for those, and that is the date that we are, targeting to have all of these in place. So how are these different? All right. As I shared in the previous slide, this isn't just a bucket of facts to know and things to be able to, regurgitate. This is really focusing around how do we do science. All right. So it breaks it down into what is classified as 3-dimensional learning. And it breaks each one of these performance expectations down into 3 component parts. Those are science and engineering practices, which is that method of how we do science. You have the disciplinary core ideas, which is the what do I need to know to be able to do this. And then I have these cross-cutting concepts, which are those broad things such as patterns, scale, things that come across not only just in science classes, but also come across in math classes and in engineering classes and technology education classes. But it's really, again, around bringing this to say, we're moving from standards that say, explain this, describe this, and we're moving more towards analyze data to do this. Design and conduct an investigation to come to a conclusion. We're moving away from stuff to know to building our own learning. We're building from the bottom up instead of getting facts and then backfilling with an experiment that confirms that. So what's this going to look like for our kids in our classrooms? Right? This is really kind of, when I get down to it as a teacher at heart, this is what I really want to know. What's this going to do for our kids? And the first piece is they're going to be looking and really working to explain phenomena that they can see. The reason I picked the Northern Lights as that lead-in slide is that's a phenomena that we can look at and investigate, and we can use data that is provided from a variety of governmental agencies to begin to process how does this happen when it comes to our understanding of light waves and magnetism and these things. So So they're gonna be looking at phenomena like that and working to build their understanding around that. They're gonna be conducting investigations. I know that's one of the things in my short time working with our board, you know, it's important, or it's been expressed as important that our kids are doing science, they have their hands on things. This isn't just getting facts and regurgitating facts. That's one of the key principles here, is really to be able to do that science and to engage in solving the problems. And to then use that information they're gathering from those investigations to generate, you know, the evidence and the claims that come around that. Right? So to really begin to think and use their reasoning skills to build solid arguments from evidence, which is something we've already been working on in our English classes and our social studies classes at the younger grades when we're talking, you know, about our testing, you know, and really looking at those open-ended questions that exist there. The other pieces, you know, it's really gathering information from a variety of sources, not just one side of this, but really pulling in all of the data that we can to build a good, solid understanding. It's going to require students to present their learning not just in bubbles, not just in filling out that physics problem, but to write about it, to speak about it, to maybe make a video about it or a podcast. So to present that learning and those arguments that they've created in a variety of formats. And then really, probably the most important thing from my lens is the goal here is to engage all students. And I probably should have gone capitalized ALL there to bring all of our students into these experiences, because they're important for each and every one of them. Not just those that really love it and thrive in that space. You know, like myself, I loved science class. I took every engineering class I could in high school, right? But there are some kids that don't, that aren't me, and that's okay, but they still need to have these skills to be able to take that next step when they leave here, whether they're going off to school, or they're going off to the military, or they're going off to the workforce. So what does this really mean for us as we look ahead? Well, we've been very fortunate, and I've been very fortunate that at the secondary level, I walk in on the coattails of some really great leaders that, you know, laid a ton of foundational work, you know, with this since 2013. Right? Since its original release, the science supervisors have done a lot of work at the secondary level to really build a solid foundation. So when we talked about this on the first day of school with the secondary science teachers, they're like, okay, yeah, we knew this was coming, it was just a matter of time. So nobody was stunned, you know, with this revelation of, hey, oh, and by the way, we have new standards that we're gonna have to start to look at implementing. So they've done a ton of good work. So I have the fortunate position to build on top of that at the secondary level. So we're gonna continue that curriculum revision process that we've been holistically involved in. We're going to continue that professional learning as to what does that look like around these new standards, and what does this have to change around assessment in the secondary level, because these performance assessment and these performance expectations really can just be the assessment. Can you design and create and conduct an investigation to do this thing? It can be the assessment. So really beginning to say, how do we frame those arguments and how do we continue to move that forward? And then finally, you know, it's really around how do we build out our professional learning for our elementary folks. We know we're focusing on social studies this year. We know that in the coming years, because again, we've got till 25, 26, there's gonna have to be conversation around science. But this also means that some of the things we've been doing in science, we might not be doing in the same spot anymore. It might move from 5th grade to 4th grade. It might go away altogether, because again, we're looking at new standards, you know, that change obviously from 2019 to now 2022. So those are kind of some of the pieces that are there. Some of the things that we've done, again, I shared the professional learning there at the secondary level, you know, again, that we're beginning to look at our assessments and update those. But our elementary STEM crew over the summer dug into this before it was official, and really began to lay that groundwork of unpacking these standards, really working through building a good 1 through 5 sequence of I can statements for students, so they have a clear map when it comes to engineering and the programming pieces that we want from our elementary kids of this is what we're doing, this is what we're building them towards, so they can build fun, engaging, enthralling lessons for our students in that specific area to take those next steps. So we've been very fortunate, again, our team there with Kirsten Moore at the helm, as our, our 1 through 5 STEM work, had phenomenal work, top to bottom on that over the course of the summer. So that's really, again, it was just meant to be an update that, hey, this is happening, but I'm happy to field any questions as best I can, as again, these are still very much in the unpacking in my brain and trying to get my head around it with our team, so. Any questions?
I had a few, so I like
Sure.
what you're saying. I looked through the links that were
Okay.
provided, so just some comments. So I wanna, I think in a couple key areas, make sure or work toward that balance that
Mhm.
we've been talking about at a board level. So, one area would be energy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the statements I saw a couple times in the standards was man's impact on the environment, which we of course have an impact, but I would wanna make sure that we're balancing that viewpoint with, the flourishing that energy provides for society,
Mhm.
that it's not just fossil fuels aren't bad
Mhm.
for the world, that they enable growth and it's how we grow our food and get around, and so I'd be looking for balance in that. I like understanding the rich energy resources in Pennsylvania, so all the energy that's available to us here. Under grade 4, okay, so I did say that. Oh, and when we talk about that bigger picture viewpoint, so again, this is still on energy, but looking at the bigger picture that, with everything in life, there's trade-offs, so yes, there's an impact, but there's also benefit. I also wrote down, if we have the ability, so from the agriculture standpoint, to take advantage of field trips to all the local farms that we have in the community. That's a great resource that we have at our disposal, so, fertilizer and seeing how things grow in the soil, et cetera. So environmental justice and social equity, I have no idea what that means, but same thing, I'd be looking for balance in that and understanding more what that means. And yeah, that was it for my stream of consciousness thoughts there.
No, and I appreciate you bringing up, the piece around the field trips and things like that, and I will update Mr. Thomas right now, as one of the people that has been reaching out to community members and look, as part of that pathway conversation, I want to leverage, again, what does our community have that can support us? Because there are, a ton of great resources, not just even here in, specifically our Pennridge community, but as we broaden out into that, greater Bucks County area, that we can really, leverage to kind of take those next steps to bring these things to life. Just again, like our trip to, Portugal and Spain, like how do we bring these things to life? So that's certainly part of the conversation that we'll be looking at as we move forward to make it systematic, so that these aren't one-off here. I go to Grass and I can do this, but I go to Divler and I get to do this. Like systematizing some of these things to make sure that all of our kids have those access to those opportunities.
Good.
So, I had some of the same thoughts as Christine had about, in recent years, it doesn't seem like there was a lot of debate, but I'm glad to hear you say that students are gonna be presented with a wealth of information and then they make the decision, because it has been kind of one-sided with, one perspective being given that something is bad for the environment, or something was good for the environment, but no consideration of the negative impacts of some of the types of energy sources that are out there. So that would be one thing. I'm glad to see that they say that it will be lots of sources and that kids are going to make up their own minds and argue both sides of the topic. I too would like to know what they mean by environmental justice and equity.
And that's again, I think, just to touch on that, that's something that I think there will be a lot of questions about.
Yeah.
Around the state that again, as we get more information out from the IU and things like that, I would suspect there'll be some clarification around that. Because to your point, it does seem very vague as to what does this actually deliberately mean. And when some of these things, when if you took the time to look through those links, it's pretty straightforward. Like, we want students to be able to do these things. That's a place where, again, I'm going to be looking for some additional clarification, just to make sure that, I understand what we're asking of our teachers.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, using those terms, it kind of gives an idea of where it's probably going and what the influence, what the perspective would be. So, that would just be my concern, is
Yeah.
that they're saying that they want students to have a lot of information from both sides, but then yet they've got this unit that it doesn't seem like it would be more than one perspective. So if you can get more information about that, that would be good.
Certainly.
And I had another, well, energy and climate. Like over the years, I'll be a woman of a certain age soon, and I know that when I was younger, I was of the generation where the paper bags were done away with. We have to save the trees. We're going to do plastic bags. Plastic bags are going to save us all and save the planet. Now we know that plastic bags are awful. Or people, places, New Jersey, you can't have plastic bags. So I would like to see more of an honest reckoning of how climate science or what have you has, where they've made predictions, things that we've done, maybe that humans thought we were doing great things, but I would like an honest assessment, I hope would be part of, what they're going to be learning, as opposed to just the kind of glossing over the ways that we've been wrong about
Right,
certain
and I think
things.
that's part of the bringing as many sets of evidence to the table as we can. Again, I know our team, we focus around one of those national organizations, whether it's the National Weather Service, National Park Service, like those, and again, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, like places where you're going to get reputable information. That's like, if we're bringing information to the table, that's what we're bringing to the table. But again, to your point of bringing multiple sets of information to allow students to process and to, again, come up with those claims and that evidence for themselves, I think is important.
And I worked for the National Science Teachers Association
Yeah.
many years ago.
So it would be a combination, right? I mean, it would be
Yeah.
a combination
We-
of updates as we learn, in
Oh, for
particular,
sure.
the science supervisor of the county will get that information, and then additionally, the transparency will come through the curriculum units. Because we identify the standards in the curriculum units, and then we build the units from them. So it'll be twofold. So Mr. Danny will come back and give some updates as he receives information, and then as we build those courses, you'll also see.
I just had some of the similar comments as Christine and Joan. Just one under weather and climate that I was looking at, it says ask questions to clarify evidence of the factors that have caused the rise in global temperatures over the past century. There's a couple. I think there's a couple spots within the standards where it talks about the rising in temperatures. So I know you mentioned like variety of resources multiple times, which I think is good just to, again, keep the balance, because there's tons of viewpoints on global warming and, different things. So just making sure that the students were getting both viewpoints to generate their own claims, look at their own evidence. So I loved hearing you say that. And then I just had a question. Like, I know you said that they're looking to do more investigations versus experiments. And just in the time that I've co-taught in science classes, I do feel like the times for labs, at least in the middle school, I can only speak to middle school, has kind of lessened, and they're doing a lot more of like the open-ended questions, and they're generating their claims. But it seems like it's less hands-on. I know when speaking to the high school teachers, they do a lot of labs here, and I love that. That's awesome. So just, I don't know if, and this is probably not what you meant, but just to clarify, you want the students are going to do more investigations versus experiments. But do you know if that's going to limit the labs? Like, I hope that maybe
So
we'll increase.
let me clarify my
Okay.
terminology here. An investigation from my lens requires them to do an experiment.
Okay.
So I am setting this up. I am collecting my data. Now I might be using this cart and this scale or this force sensor to gather this information. But from that I can then develop, based on my data, here's my claim, my data is my evidence, and here's how I'm linking those two things together. This is the reasoning I can put between those two so it makes sense. As opposed to saying, here's Newton's second law, here's an experiment that is going to confirm what I just told you. The intent is to build their knowledge and their learning from the ground to then getting to this opportunity where, okay, now I see how these pieces are connected, instead of saying, here's the fact, confirm the fact. It's let's have our students investigate some things in a safe manner. All right, I know there are chemistry classes and there are plenty of things in physics you can do that can go sideways really quickly, but to allow for students to build that learning as opposed to giving it to them and saying, here, now confirm this for us.
That's good.
And then, sometimes like that, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I know they're doing new standards, but if teachers wanting to keep something from the old standards and they're passionate about it and they feel like the kids are thriving and learning and doing all the things that we're wanting it to look like, how, and I don't even know if we know the answer to this, but how would you go against something if PDE is requiring it, but you wanna keep something that's maybe not, that they're taking away?
Well,
I was about to say,
Okay.
would you like to take it? I can do it, but hey, go for it.
Because you're not limited to just those standards,
Okay.
there's all different types of standards, and, there be certain standards that we have to teach, there, but then we add standards, we can keep standards if that's what we wanna do. So you'll see that in a lot of our curriculum.
Right, and this is kind of my
Like
this-
NGSS standards with the PA standards.
Right.
I mean, that's
Pennsylvania
it all
added
works.
the agriculture piece does not exist everywhere else. That version of it only exists in the state of Pennsylvania. But my lens on it is the standards are the floor.
Mhm.
This isn't the ceiling, this is
Right.
the floor. We can take things and add into those things, and we can bundle things together so that we're doing agricultural pieces with life science pieces, so that we're not missing these opportunities for students to also cross-pollinate this learning so that they can build a deeper, more robust understanding.
And then last thing, the scientific method, is that still core in it? I mean, I didn't really see a lot of it.
So you don't see a lot of it?
Yeah.
Because this is Eric Daney as science supervisor's opinion. I can't speak to the people that wrote and from the National Research Council. Teaching the scientific method is wonderful. We do it for the first week of school and then we hand them a recipe for an experiment. This is about doing the scientific process, doing the scientific method, and learning through that. Saying, here's what I'm trying to find out. Now, what do I think is gonna happen? What procedure can I build to test what I think is gonna happen? What data do I need to collect? And then from that data, what conclusions can I draw? Let's do the scientific method instead of talking about it and then leaving it for the rest of the year. So that's why I think you don't see the scientific method called out in all of its glory that is chapter 1 of every science textbook that has ever been written. Because I think the mission here and the goal is to take us away from doing that in isolation. This is a thing I learned, to this is a thing I do. This is a way that I can learn about my environment and what's going on in my world around me.
And that goes back to your investigation versus experimental thing,
Correct.
So this doesn't require any kind of action.
Just an
Just
update.
information.
Just
Yep.
wanted to get you prepared and everyone knows what's going on as we start building curriculum.
Yeah.
And I do wanna thank you for, speaking to your predecessors, who were wonderful and you are equally wonderful, so
Oh,
we've
thanks.
been blessed in that science department, so.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to go back to the housing and interior design. I think I know. The other question that Mr. Cormack had was just to make sure that it was in the, accounted for in the budget.
Oh,
which- yeah, right, okay.
It'll be under program improvement proposal budget.
Okay.
Would it be appropriate, Mrs. Cullen, for me to just provide a couple goal updates in terms of some things? I mean, with us a whole week and a half into school, and laying out the district goals at the August board meeting. Just wanted to provide a couple updates, some things you know, some things that you may not know in terms of pieces there. One, around that communication piece, there was an email that went out today. I know the board has seen it, but the community has seen it as well, and it went live. Just that board snapshot, which the purpose is really to provide a look back to kind of an overview of what happened in August, what were the big ticket items, what were the conversation pieces, is there clarification needed, documents all in one place, as well as looking forward to what will be covered at September meetings. And so like the main content for tonight was mentioned on that board snapshot, so people could look at that and go, oh, the science standards mean something to me, I'm gonna prioritize that meeting and come out to that one because I wanna hear what's being said, or I'll watch the meeting through live stream and things like that. So a couple thank yous, first of all, to Mr. Thomas, who is the talent behind designing that, as well as Mrs. Cullen and Mr. Wers and Mr. Rice, who have been through at least a dozen drafts of what that information could look like, and saying, you know, how do we tweak this? What does that wording need to be? So we still have some things that we're unpacking, and it's going to continue to build that portion of the website that is specific to board-related materials. But that monthly newsletter, I think, is going to serve a real good purpose in terms of kind of one-stop shopping of what are the main things that have happened, as well as that are coming up, and provide some of that communication that I think has been missing. So thank you for encouraging that goal, and also just wanted to highlight that. We've talked a lot about data. We had a really good opening meeting. It was encouraging to me that there wasn't a surprise or a worry as we've talked to our teachers about data. They are used to talking about data. They are as concerned about the district public facing numbers as some of the ones that we set goal areas for, whether that be our third grade RELA, whether that be our middle school math, whether that be our Algebra 1 Keystone. And they're not the only data points, but they're kind of symbolic of data is going to be something that we're going to regularly talk about. I thought it was really interesting as we went around professional learning opportunities and also even like faculty meetings and department meetings, the number of different ways and resources and things we've done already about data. I wanted to give Dr. Scheid and Dr. Rabarchek just a very brief, right, we don't need to do every piece of that, but as you think about our opening, you think about some of the data conversations you've had and some of the things you're excited about, would you just kind of mention both from a secondary and elementary standpoint, that's things you're thinking about? Thank you, Dr. Scheid.
Absolutely, Dr. Bolton. So that meeting was really important for everyone because data is a district goal. And the conversation started there. And I'll give you some examples at the high school and the middle school level. So our high school administrators, led by Dr. Cashman this evening, they really work together to work as an administrative team, because I'm going to connect this to our supervisors, to have our house principals work with our teachers in particular areas. So we talk about our Algebra Keystone, our Lit Keystone, and science. What they're going to be doing is they're running PLT, so professional learning time for teachers, there's building responsibilities after school, and each of those principals will be running data dives. So, and really that means that teachers will own the data, understand the data, and what that means for instruction. How do I meet the needs of the kids in front of me? So they're doing it at a high school level, and then the supervisors have always done that. So the supervisors, and they're here this evening as well, and they work with their departments. So that's limited to the coolers. So they're sitting in the classrooms. By department. We have an assessment that the state provides and it's free. It's called a CDT, Classroom Diagnostic Tools. I'm sure you're familiar with that, right? And we give that, and it's a benchmark test. So in bio, for example, we give that now. We're going to be giving our students that assessment now. That's a benchmark assessment. Where are we doing really well? What do students already know and be able to do? And where aren't we? Now teachers will they dive into that data, and then that affects their instruction. So they can see where students have, in the past, like traditionally done well, where we fell off during COVID, what we need to bring back that we did well before, what are some holes, and how we make sure that the trajectory for each and every student is where it needs to be. So now you connect that with the coaches. Now that we've looked at the data, and the coaches look at the data as well, and we have these conversations with the supervisors, how do we then assign assign the coaches to go into the classrooms to best meet the needs of the teacher who is working with the students. So coaches do work with students, but they are there to do some modeling for the teachers, right? So that they can get in there and say, okay, so we know what the deficits are. These are some strategies we know you're using. These may be more effective. We're going to try them. So it's all connected in that way. And we're seeing that at the high school, and that is growing for sure. The middle schools have been doing data team meetings, so they run data team meetings. So the science teachers are all together, the math teachers, and so on and so forth. We have Linkit, which is not just a repository for our data. All of our data is in there. It's also an analytics system. So what we have learned over the past so many years is that it's better if we just get the data and give it to the teachers. So the teachers have that data right there. Some teachers are ready to actually explore in Linkit and can do a little bit more. Everybody's at a different point. But there's no one who doesn't have the data. So that data is given to them, and you start that in September. You see where the students are. We continue to test, so we'll do another benchmark in January, and we'll see where we are then. And you'll see the effect of that, and it's a process, so you're going to go keep continuing that process for improvement. At the same time, in the big picture, as we build curriculum, we are creating common assessments. So when I talk about CDTs, I'm talking about tested subjects in the state of Pennsylvania, but not every subject is a tested subject, right? Social studies isn't a tested subject, so on and so forth. Our AP scores, right? These are things that we want to look at across the board. So as we build common assessments, whether I am a French teacher, a STEM teacher, or I'm a bio teacher, I can sit with my colleagues who are teaching the same subject. We can analyze that data, and we can learn from each other, strengthen each other's expertise so that we continue to meet the needs of all students. And that's the entire process. So that's already started. And I just want to say one more thing. I'm going to have Dr. Mark Stacy Clemmer, our data, she has been doing remarkable things. Actually, she was in the auditorium tonight helping our parents understand the value and the importance of Keystone exams. She has done a deep dive into the assessment data. She can talk to you about right away. She spends every minute that she's here analyzing data. She has met with the algebra teachers, the bio teachers, the English teachers. She's gone to the faculty meetings. She is everywhere. She worked with small groups of students. She's going to continue to work with small groups of students. And this is one thing that I think will have a really big bang for buck. She is now going to work with one of our middle school geometry teachers who learned through Heidi Hayes Jacobs the value of math language and reading comprehension in math, right? She has done a remarkable job, and her scores show that. Now Stacy is working with her to work with the math teachers in the high school so that they are teaching each other. So wonderful things are happening, and we do expect that good results will occur.
So is our first assessments or look at how things are going is January, is that, no?
Actually, it starts next week, the window opens.
Okay.
We test in September.
Oh, okay. That's
We
like
test
an
again in
initial-
January.
Okay,
So we do get a baseline first.
got it,
And that assessment that I'm talking about, Mrs. Patisky, is from the state.
okay.
So they are giving you the eligible content for the exam. They are showing you what they are going to ask on the exam.
Mm-hmm.
The standards, not the questions.
Right.
So we need to see, okay, so where are we? How closely are we aligned to the curriculum? And the curriculum supervisors, who are just fabulous, have been working tirelessly on ensuring that we are fully aligned and our scope and sequence doesn't put our students at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what that is. So we'll do that. We'll do that next time.
Okay, so that's a baseline, then January, and then it's what, April,
And then the
May?
spring.
In
Yep.
May,
Okay.
April, May, we'll be testing again.
Good.
I mean, we'll have state exams.
Mhm.
There's no point doing that assessment when you're having the state exam.
Right, okay.
So everyone's working really hard, so I just wanna thank everybody.
So the elementary level, I mean, we're fortunate we get PSSA scores earlier in the summer, and we're able to start utilizing that data immediately, along with our end of year assessments with the FMP, the DIBELS, the words, the way inventory, the math assessment unit, the math assessments that were completed over the year. And principals are already looking at that information along with teachers, even as they're doing their transition meetings from students who are going from first to second to third, and establishing those classes. So the principals, we had discussions over the summer using that data already to help determine what are the areas of focus we need to, hone in on and help students and determine what are the plans to address those certain issues. So from there, we went to the K-12, as Dr. Scheid mentioned, and that was a great overview of the district data and then digging down into the building data overall. And then from there, when they go back to the buildings, that's where the heavy work really comes into play. Because principals are working with their staff, they're working with their core team of the reading teacher, the IST, the guidance counselor, everything there, and then they break it out to the grade levels. So they're analyzing that data in kind of a scaffold approach, down to the classroom and the individual student. And then some of the things they put into play that they're looking at is that intervention extension time, which we are very fortunate to have, even though it's only 30 minutes. A lot of the buildings you'll hear call power hour, even though it's not a full hour, we still call it power hour. But what they're able to, the principals and the teachers are able to do is identify students with specific needs and group them together during that time to work on specific skills, foundational skills that they need to build upon to be more successful as they go into their regular curriculum time of the different content areas. And part of that grouping, thanks to Mr. Vogel and Mrs. Raver back there with utilizing the STAR assessment and FRECL that we use through the learning loss funds. That STAR assessment is something they can use every 6 to 8 weeks to kind of realign the students to ensure that they're making the adequate progress they need to make and be able to utilize that as they go into their content areas of instruction as well. As you know, we also have the Beyond the Bell, well, it's before the bell too now. We have some schools doing it in the morning, some schools doing it afterwards. And they're really focusing in on the ELA and the math areas and the students who have the most need in reinforcing those skills. We also have 3 schools this year that are working with parent volunteers coming in prior. I go back to Mrs. Hausline having her little training for parents coming in with the flashcards. It's very similar to that still. So it's very beneficial for parents to be able to come in and do a 10-minute reinforcement with students before they start their regular school day even. Obviously, we have the child study team, as Dr. Scheid mentioned, at the elementary level. So we're really focusing in on students based on that data, based on that progress, that we're able to put individual plans into place and really assess them over a 6 to 8 week period to make sure that they are getting the skills that they need and the strategies to be able to move forward, and resetting that at all times. As you know, we have 3 school-wide Title I buildings that have additional supports with each of those schools has an additional reading specialist and a teaching assistant in reading and or math to assist students in supporting that. And then this year, as I mentioned back at the update on the ESSERS plan, we brought in teaching assistants for the non-title schools for grades 3, 4, and 5 to work during their English language arts period and just work with small groups of students on the strategies that they were learning at that time and reinforce them. So it's able to pull small groups aside and individuals. And again, same thing Dr. Scheid mentioned, the PLTs and going deeper. We're bringing our coaches in. There's different areas for each different elementary school that there may be a need for. Those coaches are really focusing in on those specific needs and providing PLTs for teachers and having to dig deeper with those skills and strategies to be able to work with students during instructional time. So a lot going on, to say the least.
For sure, and that's just an overview.
That's just an overview.
So we look forward to providing more regular updates on those types of data points, as we have, I wrote down that for us to take a look at some CDT sample data, to get a sense for what it is. We don't need to present all of it, but to get a sense for what that looks like and what it teaches us about a certain grade level or a certain class. I think would be some power in terms of the types of data that's in front of our teachers and our administrators on a regular basis. It was neat to me, Dr. Shaw, I don't know whether you noticed or not, I almost started counting the number of times pathways was said this evening. I think it was in all 3 presentations in terms of it has become part of our language. It was part of the board snapshot that went out. I don't know if you know the number. I know it's a very healthy number in terms of the responses from Mr. Dyer has received. But oh, excellent, good. I didn't prep you for that, so thank you.
We can't believe how fast it took off after that survey went out.
Right.
It's just like everything is happening. So, this is the way Mr. Dyer has put this. So 88, after the survey went out, 88 businesses reached out expressing interest. And 47 confirmed the contact. 21 are we already have them in the system. We have 8 different companies coming to our first RAMS period who are going to be offering an overview of what they can offer students. Talk a little bit about we have childcare, we have Merck, it's a list there, which is going to just grow. I mean, I think Mr. Dyer is overwhelmed at this point with community interest. But even tonight in his classrooms, as the parents were talking to him about it, people, this one woman, she works for J&J, she wants to get involved. So, yes, there's an enthusiasm with our community who want to come in and get involved with our kids. And it's going to grow, I think, pretty quickly this year. We will have our first, I said, our RAMS period. From there, we will be scheduling opportunities based on those individuals and what they offer our kids and get them started. And then it will snowball. Because we have our arts and communication, our science teachers are beyond thrilled to be working on theirs and how they can be connected to health sciences with health and PE. And Mr. Dyer has explained everything to the faculty who are now speaking to the students. So we are very excited about it, and we do see that the potential seems endless in Penridge. You know, we have a lot of people who want to be involved. So I want to publicly thank everybody who responded and are willing to come in and help. And some people are going to come through Zoom, and some people will actually be in classrooms, and they'll have teachers assigned with people who will come in here and start helping our kids.
I think after that first RAMS period, it might be a really good recharge to kind of highlight those experiences, thank the 88 or whatever it is, as well as then say, oh, and by the way, if you forgot and you want to volunteer, right, here's the email again to kind of prime the pump one more time. But it's been neat to see the reaction and to think the opportunities that our students will have because of it. So, thank you. And then I'm sorry, do you want to say something? Okay. Then the last thing I just wanted to mention is we've spent a lot of time talking about curriculum work, and last year was a lot of reading English language arts, right? A lot of secondary, talking about reading lists, talking about literature, talking about standards and big essential questions and big ideas. And so one of the things that has been rolled out this year, and so parents tonight at back to school night, tomorrow night at middle school back to school night, parents will witness this in English classes, the access to those reading lists. And the teachers really did a nice job by class of kind of talking about here's the literature that we might be getting involved in. The teachers then will be spending time with that list with all the families that'll get it. It's also available electronically to kind of talk about in this classroom. Like, so if there's choice involved, what will that look like? And then that way there will be more opportunity in terms of for people to know in advance the types of things that are going to be happening from that standpoint. So I knew Mrs. Raver was going to be here tonight, so I just wanted to thank her publicly and her teachers as well, because that was an awful lot of work getting ready for it. There have been lots of copies made. So I saw some English teachers doing it tonight, and I know tomorrow night with the middle school back to school night it's going to happen a lot. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to mention it tonight since it's kind of hot off the presses. So thank you for that. So
Very good.
just wanted to give some updates.
So just a couple of thoughts. First, we talk a lot about collecting data, and it seems like, oh, you're collecting all of this information. What is it for? And what you just described again with the, Stacy Clemmer and the individualized instruction really is the ticket to getting kids to be, get them back to the grade level or push them up. So I'm continue to be very excited about that. And then, Mr. Thomas, this is just an idea, and I know it sounds like a lot of work even inside my head right now, but as Mr. Daney was speaking tonight, and Family and Consumer Sciences, it's his fault. You know, but I started thinking about how we have teachers who come into the curriculum meeting, and you know, Mr. Vogel, when he talks about his math courses, and for the snapshots page, it might be nice to isolate when the teachers are describing in their own words what the courses are and what they hope to achieve by, I know that's a lot of work to maybe go back through and capture some of those things, but that was just an idea that I didn't wanna forget, to say, so.
Their presentations will also be publicly shared on the
Yeah.
snapshots as attachments.
Oh, as attachments,
Yes.
separate attachments?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, just to highlight them for people, and
So
then.
people can browse at their own pace and look at
Yeah.
information.
So and then the other thing, we get a lot of questions about specifically, what are you doing to make up for the learning losses?
Mhm.
And so if those could also be isolated to just, because we can give the answer, but I think it's great to hear it come right from, you know, in the situation.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so we still don't have any we didn't have anybody signed up for public comment, but does anybody feel the great urge? All right, well, that brings us to the end of the curriculum meeting. Thank you for coming out.
Mr.
Thank you
Thomas?
for allowing us to have the late start.